The sound woke me at 2:17 a.m. Not a scream. Not quite a knock. It was the slow, deliberate creak of wood bending under weight, right outside my door. The snowstorm had sealed the lodge hours earlier. No guests. No staff awake. No reason for anyone to be moving through the halls. I lay still beneath the thin blanket, counting my breaths. 1, 2, 3. The floorboard creaked again. Closer. I stared at the dark outline of the door, half expecting the handle to turn. It didn't. Instead, something dragged across the hallway floor. Slow, uneven, as if whatever made the sound wasn't walking properly. Then came the whisper. So faint I almost convinced myself it was the wind leaking through the walls. Almost. "You took his room." My stomach dropped. The whisper wasn't angry. It wasn't loud. It was calm. Certain. Like a fact being stated. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. I didn't answer. The sound lingered for several seconds longer, then retreated, each step dragging farther away until the lodge returned to silence. I waited until morning to open the door. There were no footprints in the snow-covered hallway. Only a long, thin scrape mark, starting at my door, and ending at the stairwell that led down into the locked basement. Morning arrived without light. The storm pressed against the lodge like a living thing, piling snow so high against the windows that the world outside vanished entirely. No horizon. No trees. Just white silence pressed flat against the glass. I stood in the hallway where the scrape mark had been the night before. It was gone. No gouge. No scuff. No sign that anything had been dragged across the floor at all. The wooden boards looked newly polished, as if the lodge itself had decided to forget. That unsettled me more than if the mark had remained. I told myself it was exhaustion. The kind that creeps into your bones when the quiet never breaks. The kind that makes shadows feel intentional. Still, I avoided the stairwell. I spent the morning doing what the caretaker manual told me to do. Check generators, clear emergency exits, log temperatures. The routine helped. Routine always does. It convinces the mind that things follow order. Yet everywhere I went, the cold followed more closely than it should have. The thermostat read normal. The heaters worked. My breath still fogged in certain corridors, especially the second floor, especially near room 12. The door stood at the far end of the hall, darker than the others. No plaque. No number. Just bare wood older than the rest, its grain twisted like something that had grown wrong. I hadn't touched it. I knew I hadn't. But when I passed it that morning, the handle was warm. I froze, my hand hovering inches away from it, a slow pulse beating behind my ears. Warm meant recent. Warm meant contact. I pulled my hand back. From inside the room came a sound. Soft, rhythmic. Breathing. I stepped away so quickly my shoulder hit the wall. The sound stopped instantly, replaced by silence so complete it felt artificial. I waited. Nothing. By noon, I was angry at myself. Fear needs darkness to grow, and daylight, what little there was, gave me confidence. I told myself the lodge was old. Pipes breathed. Wood expanded. Heat traveled strangely in storms like this. Still, I skipped lunch. I didn't like turning my back to the hall. That afternoon, the radio crackled to life. I hadn't turned it on. Static filled the front desk, rising and falling like waves. I crossed the room slowly, each step cautious, and reached for the dial. Before I touched it, a voice cut through the noise. Not a broadcast. Not clear. Just close. Shouldn't be there. I twisted the dial hard. The radio died instantly. The silence afterward rang louder than the sound had. That was when I noticed the guest logbook on the counter. I was sure I'd left it in the office. The book lay open, its pages yellowed and brittle. Names filled the early years. Families, couples, winter retreats marked with cheerful notes and signatures. Then the handwriting changed. Tighter. Sharper. Shorter stays. Fewer comments. Until 5 winters ago, the entries stopped altogether. Except for one line, written lower on the page. separated from the others by a blank space that felt deliberate. Room 12 is not empty. The ink looked fresh. I slammed the book shut. That was the first time I said something out loud in the lodge. "No," I said, my voice small in the open space. "That's not possible." The word possible echoed faintly back to me, thinner, almost amused. That evening, the storm worsened. Snow climbed higher against the doors. Wind screamed down the chimneys, rattling the lodge like a warning that escape was no longer an option. I checked the satellite phone. No signal. The generator hummed steadily, the only thing keeping the dark at bay. I locked myself into my room early. At 9:43 p.m., something brushed the door. Not a knock. More like fingers dragging lightly across the wood, testing the surface. I sat on the edge of the bed, fully dressed, boots on, heart hammering so hard I was sure it could be heard from the hall. The dragging stopped. Then a voice spoke. Not through the door. From inside my head. "You're in his place." I pressed my palms over my ears. The voice continued anyway. Images flashed without warning. Snow falling endlessly, a child's small hand disappearing beneath white drifts, a man screaming a name that never answered back. I gasped, sucking in air like I'd been underwater. The voice faded. When I finally opened my eyes, frost traced the inside of my window in the shape of fingerprints. That was when I understood something I hadn't allowed myself to think before. The lodge wasn't haunted. It was occupied. And whatever lived here wasn't confused. It knew exactly where I was. And it wasn't going to let me leave. The hallway outside my room creaked softly, slow footsteps pacing back and forth, patient and unhurried. Waiting. The days blurred together. Each morning, I woke to the same silence, the same oppressive cold. Snow piled impossibly high against the lodge windows, transforming the world into a blinding white tomb. And every day, room 12 waited. I avoided it at first, but avoidance became impossible. The lodge itself seemed to push me toward it. Hallways narrowing, shadows pooling, the air heavier near that far end of the second floor. It started small. Footsteps above me when I knew I was alone. The faint sound of keys dragging across the counter. The smell of wet wool, even though the halls were empty. And the whispers. At first, I convinced myself it was wind, leaking through the gaps in the old walls. But the words became clearer. Small phrases. "Don't touch." "He's cold." "Not yours." No one spoke them. Not through the radio, not in the halls. Inside my head, maybe, but that thought alone terrified me. I tried leaving the lodge, but the snow had swallowed every road. The owner, Mr. Calder, had warned me, yes, but I thought it was mere logistics. Now, trapped, I began to understand the gravity. I wasn't just alone. I was isolated. I found the guest logbook again. It had moved from the front desk to the kitchen counter overnight. I hadn't touched it. The pages were brittle, yellowed with age, but new entries had appeared, written in a hand that was unfamiliar, yet strangely mine. "Do not sleep in room 12. He waits. Cold does not forgive." I showed the logbook to Martha, the old woman in town. Her hands shook as she clutched the pages. "They didn't listen," she whispered. "Neither of them did." "Neither of who?" I asked. Her eyes darted behind me. I felt a chill that wasn't from the storm. The boy. The caretaker. The winter that ended them both. You aren't alone." She refused to elaborate. Her lips tightened into a thin line. She shivered and whispered, "If he notices, you'll vanish too." That night, the lodge began moving around me. Chairs subtly angled differently. Doors ajar that I remembered closing. A snow shovel in the storage room stood upright 1 minute, knocked down the next. And the cold. Always the cold. Room 12 radiated it like a heartbeat. I heard voices from behind the walls. Not words at first, just murmurs. Then, one night, sharp and chilling. "He's here. You took his room." I ran the corridors, heart hammering, only to find them empty. The whispers persisted, teasing me with the echo of footsteps that weren't mine. One evening, desperate for answers, I searched the basement. The one room Mr. Calder said I must never enter. The door, usually locked, was ajar. Frost traced the frame like skeletal fingers. I entered cautiously, flashlight cutting through the black. The walls were covered in scratches, claw marks etched deep into the wood. I realized they were names, initials, carelessly scrawled over decades. Most unreadable. One I could make out clearly. Room 12 is not empty. The temperature dropped sharply. My breath formed mist. I swore I felt the floorboards shift beneath me. A child's laugh echoed faintly, high-pitched and distant, then abruptly stopped. I turned to leave, but the exit seemed farther than it should have been. The hallways stretched unnaturally, like the lodge itself was bending around me. In the days that followed, micro-events became impossible to ignore. Towels folded in precise stacks would be scattered across the hall by morning. The radio, left dead, crackled with static and whispers. Snow outside the windows sometimes bore no footprints at all, except the faint outline of a child's shoes leading from room 12 to the frozen trees. Mirrors reflected shadows that didn't match my own. I began to doubt my mind. Each night, the whispers got closer. The cold pressed on my skin like hands, and the scent of wet wool, child-sized coats filled the air at the most unexpected times. One morning, the staff quarters, the second-floor hallway, was empty, except for room 12. The door creaked open slowly. I froze in the hall, unsure if I should look. The handle was cold, frost forming around it. A small, muffled cry escaped the room. I realized I could no longer avoid room 12. It was calling me, demanding I enter. The story of the lodge, the boy, the vanished caretaker. It wasn't just history. It was unfinished, and I had walked straight into it. I was alone, yes, but not in the sense I understood. There were others here. Shadows that watched. Footsteps that followed. Voices that whispered truths I did not want to hear. And room 12 waited. The storm hit its worst on the 6th night. Snow thrashed against the windows with the ferocity of someone, or something, outside. Wind howled through the chimneys, rattling the lodge like a cage rattled from the inside. I barricaded my door with whatever I could find. Chairs, tables, even the heater from the corner. Heart hammering, I pressed my back against the wall, listening. It started with a knock. Slow. 3 times. Then another knock. From inside the walls. The whispers began. Soft, deliberate, repeating. He's here. You took his room. Cold. So cold. The lights flickered violently, then died. Darkness swallowed the lodge. I grabbed my flashlight. Its beam shook as I ran down the hallway toward room 12, drawn by some irrational compulsion. The floorboards creaked beneath my feet, though they sounded heavier than usual, like someone was pacing just behind me. When I reached room 12, the door swung open on its own. Frost lined the edges like skeletal fingers. Inside I saw the bed. Small, empty, warm, and beside it a figure knelt. Tall, thin, his back to me. He murmured something I couldn't hear. I stepped closer. The floorboards groaned. He turned slowly. His eyes were hollow, endless black. You took my place, he said softly. Not accusatory, not angry, calm, certain. The temperature dropped instantly. My breath formed clouds in the air. I tried to move, but my legs refused. I was frozen, not just by cold but by presence, by inevitability. You can leave. I whispered, more to myself than to him. The figure tilted his head. The whisper returned inside my mind, loud and clear. No. You stay. He stays. Cold does not forgive. Then the room shifted. The walls seemed to pulse, stretch. Time warped. Furniture twisted. Doors slammed on their own. I fell to the floor, scrambling. A child's cry pierced the air, high-pitched and unbearable. Then silence. Then the dragging sound again. Slow, uneven, deliberate. It circled me closer and closer. I ran blindly toward the basement. Its door, always locked, stood open, blackness spilling out like a void. The scratches on the walls seemed to move, as if the names themselves were crawling toward me. I stepped inside. Frost-covered shapes littered the floor. The bed from room 12 was there, now in the basement, and kneeling beside it. The man whispering prayers, the boy's laughter mingling with the wind. I stumbled backward. You can't have me," I gasped. I'll leave." He stood, taller than before. His face, a blur of grief and hunger. "You're already here." His voice was soft, unyielding, certain. Cold rushed over me. Hands, claws. I couldn't tell. The floor beneath me was ice. Time fractured. Shadows bent toward me from every corner. The whispers surrounded me. Dozens of voices. Hundreds of whispers. All repeating the same phrase. Room 12 is not empty. I tried the door. Locked. The basement was endless now. Walls stretching, twisting. The man approached. "You belong here," he said. "He's gone. But you stay." I screamed. The echo of my own voice warped into dozens of tiny screams, all of them mine. The child's laughter joined in. The whispers crescendoed. And then nothing. I was alone in the cold. The bed was empty. The whispers faded to a single word, floating in my head. Cold. I collapsed. My heart stopped racing. My body shook. My mind fractured. I understood then. The lodge didn't need to kill me. It only needed me to be present. To occupy. To replace. Room 12 had claimed me. And the storm outside raged on, indifferent. Spring came slowly. When the snow finally receded, the lodge stood untouched. Pristine. Silent. The world outside had returned to normal, but inside, something remained. Search teams found the building empty. No sign of me. No signs of struggle. No footprints in the snow outside. Room 12 was locked, just as it had been when I first arrived. The logbook lay on the counter, open to the final page. Written in my handwriting. Room 12 is not empty. No one knew how long I had been there, or how long I had disappeared. Mr. Calder never returned calls. Martha's house was empty, abandoned. The lodge would open for summer retreats, as if nothing had ever happened. Yet anyone who stayed, even briefly, spoke of the cold. Shadows that didn't belong. Footsteps echoing when halls were empty. Small, subtle things. Towels rearranged, objects slightly moved, the faint scent of wet wool in the corner of a room. And the whispers. Always the whispers. Some nights, when snow falls heavy and the wind howls through the lodge, the new caretaker will sit by the fireplace, listening. They claim the cold presses closer near the far end of the second floor, near room 12. And sometimes, in the dead of night, they hear it. 3 slow taps at the door. Not angry, not hurried. Patient. Certain. The lodge is patient too. Waiting. Watching. Room 12 never forgets. And neither does it forgive. Because once you occupy it, you never leave. The world outside continues. Life goes on. Birds sing. Snow melts. But inside the lodge, the frost lingers. Shadows linger. And the cold always waits. And sometimes in the silence, a new voice joins the whispers. Small. Trembling. Terrified. But present. Room 12 is not empty. The lodge claims its own. And I am part of it now.